Okay, so welcome friends. So today before starting the class, I'll be doing a quick voting. Okay, so I want to know two things. Shall I start with CSS grid or shall I um, solve the Flexbox problems for you that I gave you yesterday? So I will like all of you to vote either Flexbox or CSS grid, one of the two. I would like all of you to vote. All right, thank you, Vivek. I'll take that as a representation of the entire group. Okay, so I'll move ahead with grid. And in case you have any difficulties, right? In case you have any difficulties solving the Flexbox issue, just feel free to ask me in the Slack channel. I'll be happy to create a video and share with all of you. Okay, but it's important to practice. It's very important to practice, else, all the information will just skip from your mind. And after 2 weeks, the entire thing will be brand new for you. Hmm. So I'll request all of you to practice the two problems that I gave you yesterday for Flexbox. Okay. So let's start with the most exciting topic, CSS grid. So those who understand it, hmm, those who get to know the subtle subtle aspects of CSS grid, they just love it. They just use grid all over because it makes the CSS so much more cleaner and maintainable. Okay, the things that used to require hundreds of lines of CSS, you can do that with 3 lines of CSS grid. So it's super good, and it's very easy. In fact, I don't know why people find it difficult. It's very easy once you understand it. Okay, so we'll go into differences between grid and flex once we understand grid completely. Okay, then it will make a bit more sense. So again, let's look at some of the terminologies. And in case you have any difficulties, any doubts, please feel free to ask. Okay, don't just keep dragging yourself. Whenever you feel that you have missed something, please do ask. So there are some terminologies. These are not very important to know, hmm, but it's good to know. It will make our communication, it will make the technical communication smoother. Okay. So one is grid container. So just like Flex container, the wrapper div, the parent div, hmm, that is called grid container. Grid items are direct ascendants of the grid container. Okay. So what is the difference between why not just children? Why direct as descendants? This is something we need to understand. So let me open one of the code pens, then it will make a bit more sense. And friends, get comfortable with CodePen, okay? Because most of the interviews happens on CodePen or an environment similar to this. So in this case, if we apply display grid to wrapper, this becomes the grid container. Simple, right? If we apply display grid to the class wrapper, this becomes the grid container. And for grid item, direct descendants of the grid container. So these are all direct descendants of the grid container. So if I have something else here inside this div, hmm, So is this div with the class grandchild the direct descendant of wrapper? No, right? So we are interested in direct descendants. Okay. So direct descendants becomes grid item. Okay. Not something that is nested somewhere far below, right? So we are not counting them. So whenever I say grid item, I'm not counting them. Okay. So this is grid item. Then we have grid lines. Okay. Then we have grid lines. So this is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 by 5 grid. Okay. And how many lines does it have? It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It has 6 vertical grid lines, and it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It has 6 horizontal lines. Okay. So 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 don't never confuse between grid cells. So we have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cells, right? But how many lines do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So whenever we are talking about grid lines, we are talking about these lines. Okay. So this is grid line. This single item, any single, you know, unit which is surrounded by 4 adjacent grid lines. This is a cell. Simple, very simple. So then we have grid tracks. So what are grid tracks? So that can either be a whole of the column. Okay. So it is defined by um, uh, something that is in between 2 adjacent parallel grid lines. Okay. So So if I talk about this entire thing, it's a grid track. Okay, it's a grid track. It's a grid track. So other way to refer them apart from grid track is this is a grid row and this is a grid column. Okay, anything that is vertical, that is column. Anything that is horizontal, that is row in CSS grid. Okay, so this is another thing. Then grid area. So grid area is the total space surrounded by 4 grid lines, and it may be composed of a number of cells. Okay? It may be composed of a number of cells. So if I take any region, so for example, this entire thing is a grid area. This is a grid area. This is a grid area. Okay? And if we see, they are surrounded by 1, 2, 3, 4. They are surrounded by 4 grid lines and are composed of n number of cells. Okay. So these are grid areas. Okay. And also, if you see the properties, so we don't have an infinite number of properties. There are just a handful, and the list looks big because I've used this code format, right? So there is a display, there is a grid template columns, template rows, template areas, and shorthand for them. There is a column gap, row gap, and a shorthand for them. There is a justify items, align items, shorthand, justify content, align content, shorthand. Okay. Then there are some auto columns, auto rows, auto flow, and a grid shorthand. Just these many properties on parent and a couple of properties on children. Column start, grid column end, row start, row end, column, row, shorthand, then area, justify self, align self, place self, shorthand. So it's not an infinite list. It's a very finite, simple list. And if you understand it, if you pay attention in today's class, you'll just love grid, I tell you. Okay. So what I want for next 2 or 3 minutes is make sure that you remember all of these terminologies. Okay. Take 2 to 3 minutes to go through each one of them. What is grid line, cell, etc. And just go through all the properties once. No need to understand it. Just make yourself familiar with it. Okay. I'll give you 2 to 3 minutes for that. Just go through them. Don't get confused. Don't ask anything. Just go through them. Okay. Did you get a chance to go through all of them? Are you all comfortable with that? Hmm? Now, in case you have any questions so far, you may ask it. Are we good to move ahead? Yes, friends. Are we good to move ahead? Okay, I'll take that as yes. Thank you. Thank you for the response, Prachi, Abhishek. Uh, so yeah, apart from these properties, we have some special units and functions, right? And we will look into, um, yeah, inline grid is something uh, that does not, break the line. So for example, usually what happens is if you place something as grid, okay, so it will clear anything above it, it will clear anything below it, right? So it will take the entire region. So for example, there are two, suppose, inline elements, and in between you have kept CSS grid. I'm sure you are all are comfortable with inline and block level elements. So it is an inline, it becomes an inline element. So what happens is if there are two inline elements, for example, span, hmm, in between you have a grid, you have another span and you give it, for example, display grid. So what will happen that it will send the span before it in the line above, it will send the span after it in the line below, right? It will take an entire block. It won't remain in line with those two inline items. But if in case you want to make it inline, right, you want to make the container stay there. Hmm? So in case you want to make it stay in between those two inline items, then we use inline grid. If you want, it's a simple thing, but we will look into an example of it, Rishi. Okay. So there are a couple of extra units called fraction units. We will look into that. There are some special sizing units like min content, max content, auto fit content, and a uh, couple of min max, and repeat. Okay. So next, what we'll do, we will together, and you will be doing it. Okay. This is the exercise that you will be doing. I'll just be typing. So before we start, I want you to figure out how many how many grid lines are there in this grid and how many rows and columns are there in this grid. I want all of you to think and write the answer in the chat. How many grid lines for the columns? How many grid lines for the rows? Very important. The, the most basic thing. Very good, friends. Very good. Thank you. Thank you for trying, right? So once you have tried it, now when I'll speak, it will make much more sense to you. Thank you. I appreciate your efforts. Okay. Now let's look about the row lines. Okay. So one row line is here. One. Second is here. Two. Third is here. Three. Fourth is here. Four. And fifth is here. So there are a total of one, two, three, four, five row grid row lines here in this grid, in this example. And about column lines, let me change the color. So for the column lines, we have one, two, three, four. So whosoever answer were 5 by 4, they were correct. Okay, let me check. 5 by 4. Wow, no one of you, right? But again, congratulations on putting your effort. Congratulations on trying it out. Okay. Any questions here? Hmm? We are all clear, yes? It has this particular example of grid. Should we count lines or element? Vivek, both are different things. We just saw it now. Grid lines are different and grid cells are different. They are both different things. Hmm? And the question was, how many grid lines do we have? Horizontal and vertical, and how many columns and rows do we have, right? So grid lines is something that we have counted just, and grid track or columns and rows we will be counting now. Okay. So about grid lines, okay, we have just now counted the grid lines, and it is a very useful thing. Okay. So are you clear with it, everyone, about grid lines? Let me do one thing. Let me do one thing because this is the, yeah, no problem, Vivek. Please, I'm very happy that you all tried. Okay. And this is, I don't judge anybody, right? For me, one who is participating, one who is trying, they are the best. So I told in the very first class, someone who has done 20 courses and 20 certificates versus someone who has really tried to build something. So I'll give more weightage to someone who has tried to build something and has failed. Yeah. So I'm very happy that you tried. I'm super duper happy. Okay. But now, does it make sense to all of you that how do we count grid lines? Because this is the basis. If you don't get this, we should not move an inch ahead. So I'll do one thing here. I'll clear it to be more um, clear. And what I'll do is I'll go to mouse and I'll take a screenshot of it. Okay, so I'll take a screenshot of it. Maybe I won't include exercise. I'll take a screenshot of it. And what I'll do is I'll open the Snagit app, and for you all, I'll paste it in the notes. Okay, so that you can, when you refer it, Swapnali, I'll be repeating it now. And also I'll be adding this to our notes so that you can refer to it again and again. Because unless you get this, it will be all very confusing. So one thing, column is this vertical uh, lines and rows are these horizontal lines. Okay, so we will take dark green lines for rows. Okay, so it has, so this is the first grid row line. Okay, this is the second grid row line. This is the third grid row line. This is the fourth grid row line. This is the fifth grid row line. Okay, I'll give them numbers as well for you. So I'll give them numbers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so we have 5 what? Grid row lines. Okay, very easy. Now we will count the grid column lines. Okay. So I'll go to arrows. I'll choose light green for the columns. Maybe just a line. So this is the second. This is the first grid column line. This is the second. This is the third. And this is the fourth. So we have 4 grid column lines. Okay. So I will place numbers here. Just a minute, friend. Let me put my phone in the airplane mode. Okay, yeah. So now let me give them numbers for your reference. Okay, so oh no, it has changed it to 6. Um, how to reset it? So 1, okay, 2, 3. Friends, if you get this now, what I'm doing right now, just counting the grid row and grid line, the whole of the CSS grid will become very, very easy for you. The problem is that people don't understand these fundamentals and then they go after the advanced stuff, right? And that's why they mess up the entire thing. So these are grid column lines. Okay. So these are the grid column lines. You can think of it as an Excel sheet. Okay. Something like an Excel sheet. So we have some grids. I'll maybe remove colors from all of them. So we have a set of grid and then we have to fill them, we have to combine them, huh? And we have to make certain things. So for example, here what we have done is, friends, we have made this one of the, cells. We have made this and another cell. Okay. Then we have made, for example, this something. Okay. And then we have made this and another grid area. Okay, so we can combine things, right? Just like in the in the Excel we can merge cells, right? So similarly we can we can use a combination of cells to create areas. Okay, but grid line remains the same. Okay, it depends on the smallest element. Okay, so even though this item, suppose we make this entire thing one grid area, a big grid area like this. hmm, Still, maybe, here there are some different small um, units or different small areas like this, like this. Okay. So here there are different areas. Okay. So we need a grid, right? Even though these are merged, but in order for these three to function, we need, three cells here. Okay, it depends on the smallest one. For example, if you look at our original example, hmm, this big thing is one unit, right? This entire C cell is one unit, right? But in the same column, we have a two smaller units. Hmm. For that, we will need to divide it, right? Only then we will be able to place here. Unless we have a cell, we cannot place this small item here. Okay? If we had just, in case we didn't had this third line, okay, we had just three um, column lines, then it was impossible to place this. huh? In order to place this, we need places. So what you see in between them are grid areas, and we need these to place grid cells. Okay, so depending on the smallest item, you have to divide uh, an entire grid layout into grid column lines and grid row lines. So maybe it's not very intuitive, but it's really simple. Once we practice two, three, two, three items, I think it will make a bit more sense. So I'll copy this and I'll paste it in your notes. Okay. so that you can refer it whenever you need to. So, so I'll make it exercise 0. In case if anyone is terribly confused, please do let me know. I'll be happy to explain again. Hmm? I'll try to explain it in a different way. So why we have divided the lines into in this way. Hmm? Maybe I'll do something in Excel or something like that. Hmm? So this exercise 0 is counting counting grid column lines and grid row lines. It is a very important exercise. So now I have given it to you so that you can refer to it whenever you need to. Hmm? Even if it is like more than 80% clear to all of you, you can type yes, I'll move ahead. If it's less than 80% clear, then I'll repeat it once again. Clear, na? ठीक है, ठीक है, very good. ठीक है. Okay, now we will be doing this exercise, okay? And we will be making this layout completely using CSS Grid. Okay, great. So here in the exercise, if you'll see, so in order to, use these, you must always first fork it, okay? So you can fork it from here. You can see the button for fork here. So just fork it. The page will reload. And you have your own version of the problem, okay? So you can name it anything like experiment 2, for example. Okay? So now we can do anything here, right? We won't tamper the original one. We will do our own experiment here. Okay? So now if you see the markup, it's very, very simple. Okay. We have a wrapper or the parent div here. And we have a few direct children here, direct descendant here. And I have given them some name, okay, some text and size, width by height, okay, that we need to do it, that we need to style it in this way, okay. Very simple, just a wrapper and a few uh, direct children with the same class names, A to G, okay. And I've given some really basic styling, okay. So for example, I have done box sizing border box to all the items in the page. Even though it's not related to CSS grid, I would like you to answer what is box sizing border box? This is a very common interview question. Let me pick someone. Saikat, would you like to answer? What is box sizing border box? You may unmute yourself and speak. Treat it as an interview preparation. Saikat Mahasan.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so the question is, what is box sizing border box? What does it do?
सर बॉक्स साइजिंग मीन्स ये जो बॉक्स है इसका जो लेंथ है जो साइज दैट मीन्स ये जो रेक्टेंगल साइज है ये है बॉक्स साइजिंग
हाँ, और border box मतलब?
बॉर्डर बॉक्स मतलब ये सर सपोज इट इज ए रेक्टेंगल साइज ए बॉक्स इसके ऊपर जो जो बॉक्स है ये आई थिंक ये है बॉर्डर बॉक्स
नहीं, बिल्कुल गलत आंसर है। साइकत, मैं आपका नाम तो सही बोलता हूँ ना? साइकत?
यस सर यस
ओके, ठीक है। कौन आंसर करना चाहेंगे? बॉक्स साइजिंग बॉर्डर बॉक्स क्या है? वेरी बेसिक, इट्स अ एंट्री लेवल क्वेश्चन, इट्स a beginner question. What is box sizing borders box do? Who would like to answer?
Am I
Sagar,
audible?
you may mute yourself.
Am I
Yeah,
audible?
Rakesh, please go ahead. Hmm.
सर नहीं सर, बॉर्डर बॉक्स मतलब बॉक्स साइजिंग जो है सर, ये
Hmm.
इसका लेंथ रिप्रेजेंट करता है, ठीक है सर।
Hmm.
और बॉर्डर बॉक्स जो ये बॉक्स जो बने हुए हैं ना सर, इस पे जो लेआउट हमने किए हुए हैं,
Hmm.
आई थिंक आई एम नॉट श्योर बट मुझे लगता है कि यही होगा सर।
ठीक है राकेश, आई अप्रिशिएट. प्राची, आई अगेन अप्रिशिएट. अभिषेक, आई अप्रिशिएट, आप सबने लिखा है. ठीक है. या प्राची इज वेरी 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 क्लोज. आई क्विकली एक्सप्लेन. ठीक है. ये चीज समझनी बहुत जरूरी है. दिस इज अ श्योर शॉर्ट बिगिनर इंटरव्यू क्वेश्चन. ठीक है. सो आई go to code pen, create a pen. I'll create a div and give and put some text inside it. For example, hello. Okay. And what I'll do is I'll use CSS and I'll give it a height. Okay. So I'll give the div. Everyone, please pay full attention. Okay. Instead of just remembering answers, we should try to remember the concept. Okay. Then we will never forget it. So I'll give it a height of 100 pixel. I'll give it a width of 100 pixel. Okay. And I'll give it a background color, background color of I don't know, this is my favorite color. So this I have done. Okay. Now what I'll do is to the same div, I'll give it a border of 5 pixel solid dodger blue. Okay. So I've given it a 5 pixel ka border. Then I'll give it a padding of again, maybe I'll make it 10 pixels. Okay. Again, I'll give it a padding of 10 pixels. And now I'll give it a margin of 10 pixels. Okay. Margin is somewhere outside, so we don't need to worry about margin. Okay. See, friends, so we have given its height to be 100 pixel. We have given its width to be 100 pixels. Hmm? Everyone listen carefully. We have given it a border of 10 pixels and we have given it a padding of 10 pixels. So if I inspect it, what is the actual height that I'll be getting? So if I put it down, and if I hover over it, so do you see what is the actual height that I'm getting? Do you see 140 by 140? Friends, are you able to see 140 by 140? So, but we gave it a height of just, let me do a command plus. But we gave it a height of 100 pixel only. We gave it a height of width of 100 pixel. So why did it become 140 by 140? Because of 10 padding got added to the box sizing. 10 padding here got added to the box sizing. 10 border here got added to the box sizing. 10 border here got added to the box sizing. So the total width of the box became how much? 140 pixels, right? And similarly for the height, 10 padding here, 10 border here, 10 padding here, 10 border here, and 100 ka height that we gave. So total height became 140. Okay. Many times, in fact, most of the times, 99% of the times, what we want is if we have given it a height of 100 and width of 100, it should remain 100 and 100. Okay, Rakesh. So what happens by default for most of the browsers is that padding increases the height and width of the box. Border increases the height and width of the box. And what box sizing border box does is it prevents the size of the box to be increased by border and the padding. This is the answer. So if someone asks you what is, or even your junior, if you're teaching this to someone, if they ask you what is box sizing border box, so this is the answer. By default, border and padding increases the height and width of a box, okay, of an element. And box sizing border box prevents padding and border to increase its height or width. Okay, it becomes a part of the box. So padding becomes a part of the box. The border becomes the part of the box. That's why the name border box. Clear, everyone? Easy, na? Once you understand the concept, it's easy. Very good. So box sizing border box basically makes border and padding a part of the box sizing. Okay. This is a sure short interview question. And very easy one, right? Once you understand it, it's a very easy one. You don't have to fumble around with words. Okay. So I have given box sizing border box so that whatever height and width we give. See, this is, I would love to do that. Okay, I'll do that. Okay. So actually, we are not covering all the aspects of CSS, right? There are lots of such things in CSS, but on your request, I'm taking CSS grid class. So where to add it? Let me add it here only, okay? Just for your reference. Let me add it as a side note here, okay? Let me add it as a side notes. Okay, I'm in a different window. That's why you're not able to see what I'm doing. So what I am doing is that this is very specific to CSS grid, right? So I'm adding a side note here. Side note. Okay. And the question is, what does box sizing border box do? Okay. And I'll surely add my answer here, okay? Else it will take too much of time. I have to cover lots of things today, okay? So I'll surely answer. So I'll mark it as to do for Vivek, okay? So I'll answer it here for all of you, okay? Okay. Next, let's move. Rakesh, only one classes for CSS. Okay, you mean our class? Y- yeah, I think you. Yes, yes, Rakesh.
मैं ये कह रहा था कि जो मतलब इम्पोर्टेंट है सीएसएस में कि एक क्लास ले लेते तो
राकेश, मुझे बहुत खुशी होगी लेके, बट
जो सर
बिल्कुल
इम्पोर्टेंट
टाइम
है
नहीं
सीएसएस
हमारे
में जो प्रोजेक्ट करते टाइम पे जो यूज होते हैं उसी का सिर्फ ले लेते क्लासेस तो
इम्पोर्टेंट यार राकेश, आइडेंटिफाई करना कितना मुश्किल है ना, सीएसएस इतना वास्ट है। आई मीन
यस सर,
जावास्क्रिप्ट से डबल टाइम लगती है सीएसएस सिखाने में, तो आप समझ लो सीएसएस कितना वास्ट सब्जेक्ट है।
सारा
हम
नहीं
एक
सर,
काम,
कुछ पोर्शन
हम्म,
सर जो यूज होते हैं, मतलब जब
ठीक है, तो मेरे ख्याल से इसका सबसे बेस्ट अप्रोच रहेगा राकेश, जो कि हमने पहले भी डिस्कस किया था, और मैंने उसके लिए हाँ भी भरे थे कि कुछ एक कंपोनेंट्स प्रोजेक्ट से लेके मैं स्टेप बाय स्टेप बनाऊंगा, है ना।
यस
और
सर,
उसमें उसमें जो भी बीच बीच में आती रहेगी चीजें, वो सब क्लैरिफाई मैं करता जाऊंगा, जैसे अभी हमने बॉक्स साइजिंग बॉर्डर बॉक्स किया, है ना।
यस यस
तो इस टाइप से हम करेंगे, और आप बिल्कुल चिंता मत करो राकेश। देखिए, सबसे ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट है कि आप सब अच्छे डेवलपर्स बने, आप सब अच्छे इंजीनियर्स बने, और उसके लिए एक बार हमारी करिकुलम पूरे हो जाते हैं, so I would love to share lots of resources with you, and मैंने हालांकि जब शुरुआत में कॉन्ट्रैक्ट हुआ था तब बिल्कुल स्ट्रिक्टली मना कर दिया था इन्हें कि मेरे रिकॉर्डिंग्स दूसरे क्लासेस में शेयर नहीं कर सकते, पर अब मैंने बिल्कुल फ्रीडम दे दिया है इन्हें, है ना, कि जैसे नेक्स्ट जब सीएसएस क्लासेस होगी तब भी वो रिकॉर्डिंग्स आपके साथ शेयर कर सकेंगे। और जब यू नो अ, और इनके लिए जो है मैं डेफिनेटली एक या दो क्लासेस रख लूंगा, पर मुझे मन है कि पहले मैं जो करिकुलम हमें पूरा करना है, रिएक्ट सीखना है, पहले वो पूरा कर लेते हैं, और बीच बीच में जो डाउट्स आते रहेंगे उन्हें हम क्लियर करते रहेंगे।
ओके
या प्राची, डेफिनेटली मैंने भी रिक्वेस्ट किया है अ, पूजा जी को और दूसरे रोहित जी वगैरह को कि जब भी सीएसएस अगले बैच में होगा, तो आप में से जो भी इंटरेस्टेड हो आप ज्वाइन कर सकते हैं, है ना। आई विल बी वेरी हैप्पी। और अगर आप सबके लिए स्पेशल मुझे क्लासेस लेना पड़े कुछ वीकेंड्स, तो उसके लिए भी मैंने बिल्कुल अपने तरफ से हाँ भर दिया है। हम्म, लेकिन अभी हम लोग जो हमारा टॉपिक है उस पर फोकस करते हैं, ठीक है। नहीं तो फिर ये भी एक वास्ट टॉपिक बाकी रह जाएगा नहीं तो। हम्म, तो ठीक है। तो देखिए मैंने यहाँ पे क्या क्या सीएसएस ऐड किए हैं। मैंने बॉक्स साइजिंग बॉर्डर बॉक्स कर दिया है सभी आइटम्स का, ठीक है। क्यों किया है? सो दैट पैडिंग और बॉर्डर साइज को इफेक्ट नहीं करें, एज सिंपल एज दैट। मैंने रैपर में कुछ पैडिंग दे दिया है, ताकि ये, अगर ये पैडिंग में नहीं देता तो आपको ये बैकग्राउंड नहीं दिखता गोल्ड का, है ना। इसलिए मैंने ये पैडिंग दे दिया है, सो दैट आपको पता चले कि ये पेरेंट के अंदर है, ठीक है। फिर उसके बाद जो डिव है, सारे डिव को मैंने 1 पिक्सल का बॉर्डर दे दिया है, बैकग्राउंड कलर व्हाइट कर दिया है, और जब भी कोड पेन रिफ्रेश नहीं होना, एक स्पेस देके बैक कर दो, तो यहाँ पे आएगा कोड पेन इज अपडेटिंग, और वो रिफ्रेश हो जाएगा, ठीक है। और बैकग्राउंड कलर मैंने व्हाइट दिया था, अ, और ठीक है, उसको फिर मैंने कहीं ओवरराइट किया होगा। ये ब्लू मैंने कहा दिया, बैकग्राउंड ब्लू दिया है, तो ये व्हाइट की कोई जरूरत नहीं है इधर, ठीक है। तो ये मैंने कुछ बहुत ही बेसिक स्टाइलिंग किया है, सो दैट चीजें स्पष्ट नजर आए, हाँ, ग्रिड के कंटेनर को और आइटम्स को आप क्लियरली देख सको, ठीक है। अब मैं एक काम करता हूँ, अपने विंडो को मैं चेंज करूंगा, आपको थोड़ा छोटा नजर आएगा, लेकिन वो जरूरी है। तो मैं विंडो को अभी चेंज करूंगा, ठीक है। मैं बड़े स्क्रीन पे जा रहा हूँ, सो दैट मैं जो प्रॉब्लम है उसको भी आपको शो कर सकूं, सो दैट हम साथ साथ प्रॉब्लम और सॉल्यूशन दोनों को एड्रेस कर सके। जस्ट गिव मी अ मिनट। तो यहाँ पे मैं स्टॉप शेयर करता हूँ एक बार, स्टॉप शेयर, और आप सबका पार्टिसिपेशन चाहूंगा मैं अभी, हाँ। स्टॉप शेयर, और आई विल अगेन हिट शेयर, and I'll share desktop 2 this time, so the bigger desktop। आप में से जो मोबाइल में है उनको बहुत छोटा नजर आएगा फ्रेंड्स, क्योंकि हमें डिजाइन भी साइड बाय साइड ओपन रखना है, और हमें प्रीव्यू भी ओपन रखना है, हमें कोड भी ओपन रखना है, हमें सारी चीजें एक विंडो में ओपन रखनी है। तो मेरे पास और कोई ऑप्शन नहीं है इसे बड़े स्क्रीन में शिफ्ट करने के अलावा, ठीक है। तो मैं इसको यहाँ पे इस तरह से कर देता हूँ। आप सब देख पा रहे हैं मेरा एक्सटर्नल मॉनिटर? ठीक है, तो मैं चैट विंडो ओपन कर देता हूँ और हाँ, गुड, थैंक यू फॉर द कंफर्मेशन फ्रेंड्स। ठीक है, तो एक और विंडो ओपन करने की जरूरत है, न्यू विंडो, जिसमें हम अपने नोट्स को भी अपडेट करते रहेंगे यहाँ पे। सो आई जस्ट copy this and paste it here. आप सोचते रहिए हम क्या क्या करने वाले हैं तब तक। सबसे फर्स्ट काम हम क्या करेंगे फ्रेंड्स, जो हमारा रैपर डिव है, जो हमारा पेरेंट डिव है, हम उसे देंगे डिस्प्ले ग्रिड। ठीक है, आपको कुछ भी फर्क अभी नजर नहीं आएगा, ठीक है, पर हमने डिस्प्ले ग्रिड दे दिया। फिर ग्रिड हमें एक बहुत ही पावरफुल फीचर देता है, वो है गैप। और गैप में हम इस तरह से गैप दे सकते हैं। तो हर रो के बीच का गैप 30 पिक्सल हो जाएगा और हर कॉलम के बीच का गैप 20 पिक्सल हो जाएगा। एक लाइन में हमने गैप डिफाइन कर दिया अपने ग्रिड सिस्टम का। ठीक है, तो इस तरह से आपको मिल जाएगा कि हर रोज के बीच में 30 पिक्सल का गैप, हर कॉलम के बीच में 20 पिक्सल का गैप। ठीक है, तो हमने अभी तक 2 लाइन ऑफ कोड लिखा है, डिस्प्ले ग्रिड और गैप को हमने 30 पिक्सल और thank you for reminding me, Vivek. Thank you very much. Okay, so friends, we have applied two properties yet to the parent. One is display grid, and second is gap 30 pixel and 20 pixel. Okay, so what this does is 30 pixel, the first 30 pixel applies a gap of 30 pixels in between all the rows, and the 20 pixel applies a gap of 20 pixel in between all the columns. Okay, next thing, we will go to each and every individual item. So we will go to A. Okay, so A, we have to define a grid row, and here will be the start line and here will be the end line. Then we have to define grid column, and here is going to be the start line of the column and here will be the end line of the column. Grid column, grid row, start line here, and grid row end line here. Here will be grid, maybe I'll just write row start line to keep it precise, and here will be column start line. This is the way that we are doing it right now. It's called the explicit way of defining grid. We are defining everything explicitly. There is another way of doing which is called implicitly. That means we will let grid calculate. Okay. Okay. For now, for the item A, what is going to be the row start line for the cell, for the grid area A? What is going to be the grid row start line? It's going to be 1. Okay, so I'll place 1 here. What is going to be the end line? It's going to be grid row line 2. So grid row ka end line would be 2. For column, what is going to be the first line? Start line is going to be 1 and the end line is going to be 2. Okay, so 1 by 2. For cell B, okay, that's why I laid so much of emphasis on start line and end line, because we will be using a variation of this throughout, okay, in different syntaxes, in different shortcuts, but the concept will be the same. Okay, so for the second cell, that is B, what is the start row line? Friends, please answer in the chat if possible. What is the start row line for grid number B? 2. And what is the end? 3. So you should be typing 2 by 3 when I ask the question. Okay. So for B, the grid row is going to be 2 by 3. For B number grid area, the grid column is going to be, the grid column is going to be, yeah, correct, 1 by 2. The grid column is going to be 1 by 2. Now, if you see, friends, the grid column for both A and B are the same, essentially because they are in the same column, right? But for the row, they are different. They are in different rows. Okay. Now let's go for C. Let's go for C. So, friends, please figure out what should be the grid row and grid column for the C. Grid row and grid column for C. C. Where does C start? C starts, C's row starts at 1 and ends at 3. Yeah, no problem. So it's 1 by 3, start and end. And what about column? Its column starts at 2 and ends at 4. Good, good everyone. 2 by 4. Do you see the grid taking shape? Do you see slowly our grid is taking shape? Good. Now, friends, tell me for D, what is going to be the grid row start and grid column start and end? For D, it's 3 by 5 and 1 by 2. Okay? So it's 3 by 5 and 1 by 2. Okay? Now for E, it's 3 by 5 and 2 by 3. Okay? So for E, it's 3 by 5 and 2 by 3. Clear? And the grid is smart enough. If we have applied these many of explicit values, it has automatically found out things for F and G, but still we will make it explicit. Okay, since it's an explicit grid, so let's do it. So friends, can you tell me what's going to be value for F? F is going to be 1, 2, 3 by F is going to be 3 by 4 and 3 by 4. Very good. Excellent. Excellent. It's going to be 3 by 4 and 3 by 4. And G is going to be 4 by 5 and 3 by 4. Correct. Very good. Good. So what we have done so far, friends, is we have given it a structure. Okay. We have given it a decent enough structure, right? It's kind of taking shape. The things are positioned well. So things are positioned well, but not sized properly. Okay. So how will we size them? How do we size them? For that, we go to the parent element. Okay. We will go to the parent element and we will use a property called grid template columns. Okay. And we want the first column to be 100 pixels wide, the second column to be 200 pixel wide, and the third column to be 50 pixel wide. Does it make sense? We want the first column to be 100 pixel, hmm? The second column to be 200 pixel, and the third column to be 50 pixel. This is 50 pixel, this is 200 pixel, this is 100 pixel. So we will write it this way: 100 pixel, 200 pixels, and 50 pixels. Okay. Then we use the property called grid template rows. And the grid template rows is what? We want the first row to be 100 pixel, right? The second to be 100 pixel. The third to be 50 pixel. We get to know that from the smallest cell. And the fourth to be 50 pixels, right? So the grid template rows turn out to be 100 pixels, 100 pixels, 50 pixel, and 50 pixel. Something is off, friends. It does not look grid template rows grid. Oh, spelling grid template. Okay. So now we have the exact grid that we needed. And which properties have we used? One, display grid, gap, grid template columns, grid template rows. So these four properties we have used in parent. Okay. And in the child, we have used grid row and grid column. Okay. Let's go back to our notes. Was it easy? Just 4 or 5 properties and a bit of calculation, right? So now if we look into the notes again, so we have seen this display grid, template columns, grid template rows, Okay, we have seen gap, which is a shorthand for column gap and line row gap together. And we have used in the child properties, we have used grid column and grid row. Okay, so instead of writing grid column, we could have written grid column start and grid column end. Okay, instead of writing 4 by 5, we could have written grid column start 4, grid column end 5. Okay, but this is a shorthand provided to us from grid that you can use slash and write the start line and the end line. And in most of the professional, CSS written, you will find grid column used. So, but just by learning grid column and grid row, you have already learned all of these. Are you getting what I'm saying? So you could have written, for example, this grid column. I'll just show you one example, okay? So that it's 100% clear to everyone. So instead of writing grid column 1 by 2, I could have written grid, maybe I'll write below so that it's more explicit. I could have written grid column start to be 1 and grid column end to be 2. Okay? This thing and this thing is exactly same thing. Here we are writing start and end separately, and here we are using a shorthand notation using slash. Okay, so we have essentially learned a lot of properties today. So this way of teaching is called the macro first way of teaching. Okay, so we, instead of diving into minor details, instead of diving into small details, we take the overall picture first. We create a small project first, right? So that we have an overall, a holistic understanding of the subject. And then we slowly go into the minor details, right? So right now, I want you all to just go through it once. Okay. So just remember, there is no other way to, enforce it, that we have used display grid, we have used gap, we have used grid template columns in the parent, grid template columns in the parent, okay? And we have used grid template rows in the parent. And also in the exercise, uh, you have this starting code pen, right? You have this for the exercise one, you have this starting code pen. So I'll highly encourage all of you to just open this and try to solve it yourself at home, either today or anytime during the week. Okay, only then this syntax will set in your mind. Okay, and then it will make much more sense to go into advanced deep topics of this grid. Of course, we'll be seeing a couple of more minor details here. Okay, until here, any doubt, friends? Display gap, template columns, template rows, and grid row, grid column. This is at parent level, this is at child level. Shall we move ahead a little bit more today? No doubt. Very good, very good, very good. Take care. Let's move a little bit ahead. Hmm? So now we will refactor the code. Okay, now we will make some minor changes to the code. So yeah, so now let me comment out everything that we did, friends. Okay, so let me comment out everything. So I started with the child this time in the first example, and then moved ahead to the parent. Okay, this time we will do the other way around. So I will comment out these code. and I'll comment out each of these code. Pay attention, friends. I know it's more than an hour you're listening to me, and I appreciate your participation and enthusiasm, but please pay attention because it's super important. Once you understand grid, you'll use it everywhere. It's so powerful and so easy. And you don't need to remember everything. Feel free to refer to notes, feel free to refer to MDN articles anytime. I'll also make a cheat sheet for all of you so that you can refer to all the properties in just one page. Okay. So I've commented everything out. Okay. Now what we'll do is we will just uncomment the code that we wrote for parent. So you'll see that I have not written anything for children. I have not written absolutely anything for children. Hmm? Just by providing these properties, it has started taking some shape. Just pay attention to it. So look at the exercise. Um, when you start, yeah, sure. But now, Arvind, pay full attention to this. Hmm? Now forget about future ke classes. Pay full attention to what we are doing right now. Okay? I'll definitely inform all of you. Dekho, we have just written these 4 lines of code. This is the problem. This is the live preview. This is the code. Please have a look and try to understand what is happening. What is our browser and grid trying to do? Please look at all 3 of these. Please give it a minute. What did you notice, friends? So we gave the column size, right? So we gave that this column should be 100 pixel, this should be 200 pixel, and this should be 50 pixels. Okay. And we gave row sizes. This should be 100, this should be 100, this should be 50, this should be 50. So the browser and CSS Grid did a wonderful job, right? It tried to make certain calculation and do the best adjustment that it could, right? Now, what we should ideally be doing when you get such an assignment is that first write the parent level template, okay? Write template columns, write template rows, hmm? Write display grid, write gap, and then try to fix whatever is not in the place. So right now you can see that A is entirely in the place and B looks out of the place, C looks out of the place. So let's target C, okay, and see what happens. So what I'll do is I'll just uncomment the code for C. And you will see that I have not written anything for A and B. They are still in place and the C has taken the perfect position. You see what's happening? It's perfectly okay if we are defining things explicitly. It's perfectly okay to write A and B's code. But if we just write the code for the things that are out of the place, other things arrange itself. So what is happening here is that for C, it's starting from 1 and ending at 3. You see? 1, 2. Let me annotate. Let me annotate to be very, very clear. So for C, for grid row, it's starting at 1, 2, and ending at 3. Do you see this? 1 and 3. For C, grid column is starting at 2 and ending at 4, right? So whatever we have written here, the browser is doing exactly that. Hmm? So this one space was empty. This second space was empty. So browser automatically filled in A and B here, and rest of the things were pushed below. Making sense? So I'll clear all my drawings. Now I'll write something else that is out of place. For example, D. D looks out of place. So I'll uncomment D and E looks out of the place, right? E should be taking the full thing. So I uncomment E. And just by uncommenting a few of them, rest of everything is in its place. So we don't really need to write anything for A, anything for B, anything for F, and anything for G. So why did I do this for you in the very beginner lesson? Because you should be aware that whenever we are writing a code for any of the grid area, it affects others as well, especially the ones after that. Okay? So whenever we define template columns and template rows, something happens, right? Things happen and it creates an imaginary, and this is really good in Firefox. Let me show you that, or I'll show you later. So you'll be able to visualize all the template rows and columns in the Firefox really well. Let me see if Chrome is doing that. Let me quickly open it in a new one. Let me inspect it. Let me go to the parent. Do we have a nicer display for this? No, we don't have a nicer display for this. Yeah, so the way Chrome does it is when you hover over the wrapper, you are able to see a couple of lines, right? You can see the gaps and a couple of things. But if you see the same thing in Firefox browser, Firefox, hmm, and now I inspect it and I go to the parent. So you see, here you have line numbers. Okay. So in the Firefox, I selected the wrapper hmm, and I went to layout. I could see grid. I'm checking in line number. I'm checking in area names. I'm extending the lines infinitely. See, so I can see all the line numbers here. Do you see this in the Firefox? This is line 1, this is line 2, this is line 3, this is line 4, and this is line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 again. And we can see that what's going on, right? So this is very, very good for debugging, right? So Firefox has an next level way of working with grids by default, right? Without installing anything. So this is something we need to remember. What have you done with it? Yes. Great. So friends, just now what we have learned is that whenever we give grid row and column properties to some of the grid areas, it affects other areas, especially that is after them. Okay. Grid tries to do all the many of the calculations for you. I like to quickly cover some other things. Okay. Yeah. So this we have done. Then yeah, this again we have done. Now we'll learn one another keyword called span. Okay. So for the C, hmm, we have said that start from 1 and end with 3. Start with 1, start with 1 and end with 3. Instead, we can say start with 1 and span to 2 rows. Okay? Start with 1 and span to 2 rows. So how do we write this? Span 2. This is exactly the same thing, right? So for the column, we wrote 2 by 4. Instead, we can write start from 2 and span for 2 of them. Okay, friends? So here we can do 2 and span 2. Okay. Similarly, for D, if I want to use span here, okay, what should I use? If I want to span end, what should I use? It's 1, 2, 3, 3 by 5. Okay. So 2. So again here 3 and span 2. Okay. Column 1 by 2. So it's okay. So do you get it? What's the use of span? Very easy. Nothing fancy. Let's move ahead and look at one or two more concepts, friends. So instead of writing start and end, we can write the start and where do we want, how much? Okay, Rishi, I'll repeat it. So I'll command Z. So for D, for grid row, we wrote it should start from 3 and end at 5. For grid row, it should start at 3 and end at 5. Instead, what we can write is start at 3 and span to 2 columns, 2 rows, right? Start at 3 and then span 2. So instead of counting the end line, we can just count the number of cells we want it to cover. It's like merging the 2 cells towards the rows. ठीक है? So instead of 3 by 5, we can easily write span 2. Okay, Rishi and every one of you, you know, we have learned a really complex logic in a very simple way. But you will have to practice it if you want to set it in your mind. Else, within 2 weeks, everything will be gone. Hmm? Everything will just wash out from the mind if you don't practice it. Okay? That's why I take so much effort to build all these pens for you, right? So that you can practice it at home. Okay, let's quickly learn a couple of more concepts. Yeah, now let me introduce the repeat function, okay, that CSS Grid provides us. So here at the parent, if we see that we are repeating 100 px twice and 50 pixel twice. Instead, what we can do it, friends, we can write repeat 2 times 100 pixels, and we can do repeat 2 times 50 pixels. Easy, friends? Hmm? So instead of repeating things in template rows and columns, we can use the repeat function, how many times we want to repeat it, and what is the value that we want to use. Okay? So this essentially means 100 pixel, 100 pixel, 50 pixel, 50 pixel. Very easy. Hmm? Now let's take one more topic. Now let's check what happens when we set grid template rows to auto. So what I'll do is I'll set grid template rows to, instead of giving it explicit values, I'll maybe copy this, comment this, and give it the default value of auto. Now, friends, please quickly tell me, how is grid taking the decision of the height, the size of the rows? Hmm? It is deciding by the inner content, okay, of the smallest item, inner content of the smallest item, and then the gap. So since this was 2, hmm, since for the C we wrote that it should span to 2 rows, it takes 2 rows plus the grid. Do you remember, friend, we used to do these calculations while working with Flexbox. Gap and add the percentages. Remember? But grid does all this calculation for us. Hmm? We will learn more about implicit grids where we just ask grid to take care of everything. But before that, you should understand explicit grid well, where we are telling grid to do everything, right? So here it's 50 pixels. No, not 50 pixels. It's taking the height of the content. Here it's taking the height of the content. Since for E, we have asked is to span for 2 columns, 2 rows, 3 to 5. So it's taking height of this plus the gap. As simple as that. So friends, again, you know, I have already shared these notes with you. Here is the starting code pen. Hmm? You will get the recording, but I don't think you need the recording because we have practiced everything a lot. Okay. I really don't think you need the recording, but still you will be getting the recording. You are clear with the concept of column lines and row lines. Hmm? Just open the starting code pen, read the problem, try to solve it yourself. In case you get stuck, peek into the solution, close the solution, and again start implementing it yourself. It should not take you more than 10 minutes to do it. Since I was explaining each and every step, it took us such a long time. But if you do it by yourself, it should not take you more than 10 minutes. Okay, friends? Then try to refactor all that you have done here using this. Okay, so start by commenting out everything. Huh? Then start with the parent first. Then do this one, then use the span keyword, then use the repeat, and then use rows. This will again take you 5 minutes. In 15 minutes you will be able to revise this entire bigger picture of CSS grid. Can you all promise me that you all will do it once? That will be justice to the hard work that I have done to create all of these. Can you guess for this 90 minutes class how much preparation I have done? How much time I have invested in this? Hmm? Almost yesterday whole night. Hmm? Yesterday whole night I was trying to simplify things for you, making pens for you, modifying pens for you. Hmm? So you should practice it for 15 minutes in the coming week, and then you will be able to understand the further topics that I'll teach related to CSS grid. Okay? Else all will go bouncer. Hmm. So thank you everyone for your response. And I really expect that all of you will practice exercise 1 and 2, exercise 0, 1 and 2. And yeah, let's meet the next time. Okay. If my time or my um, uh, if my schedule allows me, I may record a video for this as well, but it's doubtful because my weeks are really jam packed. So yeah, if I get time, I'll record, else we will meet directly the next week. Please use Slack to help each other. Okay? Ask questions and don't wait for my answer. All of you keep helping each other. Okay? And we will make it an assessment criteria as well. The one who helps the most, they get some, just like in companies we get, you get some extra, uh, extra grades for that. Okay, ji? Thank you very much for your participation. See you. Thank you. Thank you for that, Ashish. Bye. Bye. Bye-bye.